we first talked about, well, the current assault from the Israeli Defense Forces onto Gaza, also the humanitarian crisis that is unfolding on the Gaza Strip, calls for a ceasefire, and whether that's actually possible or desirable, and then also the threat of homegrown terrorism here as a result of this conflict. Benjamin, I won't let you take your pick of all that, but what were your reaction to what Mark White was saying there with regard to the terror threat?
In this country?
Yes.
I think, we have seen this before because the Afghanistan and Iraq invasions clearly had consequences for homegrown terrorism. But I often don't like that being a reason to make our policy decisions, because it feels like that allows terrorists and terrorist sympathisers to dictate our foreign policy and how we should behave. And I think if anything is a lesson of what's been going on in Israel and Palestine and Gaza, it's that if you sympathise, if you try and meet in the middle with terrorists, then they will take advantage. And I don't think that should be our foreign policy or Israel's. Yes,
David, our security services must be working overtime.
Yeah, I think the threat of a new terror attack is very real because of what's happened here. People's emotions are heightened at the moment on both sides. There are people suffering on both sides of this, but there's a very, very big pro-Palestinian caucus in this country. You see them out on the streets, most of them being peaceful, but then some of them, are shouting things which could be construed to be inciting violence, inciting crime and glorifying terrorism. So the next step from that is for people to actually then go and actually do a terrorist attack themselves in this country. So the security services must be working overtime. That is a big worry. But, this is one of the reasons why I've called for a ceasefire personally, because I don't want to see any more suffering, any more slaughter on either side over there in the Middle East.
But is that call for a ceasefire from David, is that naive, Benjamin?
I think it is, because what would a ceasefire look like? I mean, Mark White actually explained it in your interview that do you think that if you stopped the war on Gaza, in Gaza, that Hamas would go, yes, OK, we're so sorry, it was a terrible mistake? Of course they wouldn't. Their entire existence, their explicit reason for being in creation is to destroy Israel and the Jewish people. And all they would do is use that as time to regroup and attack. And I think that it's easy for people sat in the comfort of Britain to say, well, war is profoundly ugly and look at these atrocities that are going on. Why don't you just stop it? Well, for the reality of people in Israel, which includes Jews and Arabs and Muslims and Christians on the receiving end of what happened on the 7th of October, they will still be under that severe danger. You have to remove Hamas, and that means it's going to be pretty ugly. And we know, because we learned it in recent days, that Hamas has put one of its bases under the main hospital in Gaza. I think that shows who is the seriously bad actor. And in my opinion, although they're far from perfect, it's not Israel.
And there are a huge number of people in this country and across the West who don't believe anything that the Israeli government put out. They don't believe that the massacre even happened. I've seen people saying this online, and it's deeply concerning because there is so much propaganda going about, and it is hard for people to know what is and isn't true. And, of course, if you have an ideological background to this, then you're going to pick and choose what you believe, and it could be dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's propaganda on both sides. And we have to realise this is what happens in a war. The fog of war is there, and it's very, very hard to work out exactly the truth of what is going on. But yeah, people are emotionally connected to one side or the other in very many cases. I'm not pro one side or pro the other. I'm just pro peace, and I see this as a conflict which has been going on for decades, and I wish it would come to an end.
And Benjamin, I know you've spoken about this before, but Jewish people are feeling unsafe at the moment in this country, and Britain provided a sanctuary for Jewish people, and now Jewish people are feeling unsafe, unwanted even, and fearful of the future. That is damning.
I mean, we've seen, I think the figure is a 1,200% rise in anti-Semitic hate crimes being recorded if you compare it with the October of last year. And I think, we started this discussion by talking about homegrown terrorism. I think one of the dangers when you see protest marches like yesterday and chants of jihad and from the river to the sea, which means the eradication of Israel, that there is almost a normalisation of that kind of extreme rhetoric, that extreme view that many would consider anti-Semitic, I would, and that becomes normalised by these protests and far more people take it for granted. And London has a big Jewish population. Half of all the Jews in Britain live in the capital city. And so when they see instances like that, I know from Jewish friends that they're scared to go out. I interviewed Josh Howie, who's a presenter, a comedian on Headliners here, a Jewish man, and he has 5 kids. And he told me a couple of weeks ago when this started, he's had to explain to his kids why they shouldn't wear their kippah, their hat, or why they shouldn't wear their school uniform with a Hebrew writing on it to go to school, because he said to his kids, there are people that hate you because of who you are as a Jew. Now, the idea that you've got people feeling like that in modern Britain should shame us all.
Yes, and we've fought these battles before. It's deeply, deeply sad to see, David, isn't it, that Jewish people are feeling under attack in Britain due to this conflict, Israel-Gaza. What question to put to you? How do we show Jewish people that they are welcome in this country?
Of course, I mean, it's absolutely horrendous, isn't it? That anyone, any group cannot just be who they are. You know, the Jewish people who've lived in areas and communities for decades and centuries now feel unsafe in their own communities. This is absolutely horrible. You know, I just wish that this wasn't coming out and being played out on the streets of this country. You know, but how we deal with this is a difficult question.
We've seen people propagating conspiracy theories and anti-Semitic tropes that would be welcomed in Nazi Germany, to be honest, and it is pretty horrifying and disgusting. I know that the vast majority of people in this country absolutely detest anti-Semitism.